Now, before we jump into our chat today, I want to let you know that we have muted all of your lines, so you can feel free to multitask or do whatever you need to do while you listen to the chat. Hopefully you're joining us on your computer, so you can ask David Troxel, our expert joining us today, your questions. And to do that, just go ahead and type those into the box on your screen. You can also email us your questions at livechat@homeinstead.com. We always read your questions, and I try as hard as I can to respond to as many as possible, and I will be monitoring that during the live chat today. Also, you will hear several mentions of resources throughout the chat. Don't worry about taking notes. We will send you an email with a link to the recording of this chat and all of the mentioned resources. Okay, now let's get started. I'd like to introduce to you who you'll be hearing from today. My name is Kat Kaler. I'm the social media advocate here at Home Instead Senior Care. I have the pleasure of chatting with all of you on our various Facebook pages and on Twitter. And of course, each month I invite one of our Alzheimer's experts to join our live chats. I am thrilled to have David Troxel joining us again. David is an internationally known expert in Alzheimer's disease and memory care. He's worked for over 25 years in the Alzheimer's care field, developing and teaching care techniques as a consultant, writer, and speaker. And David has held one of the most important roles as the caregiver for his mother. David, welcome to our chat today.
Thank you very much, Kat. Great to be with you and the people on the call.
So today, David, we are talking about traveling with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or another dementia. I know that some might argue this might not be a good idea at all. So why are we talking about it? Can you maybe shed some light on some of the benefits or why someone might choose to travel with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or dementia?
Well, thank you very much, Kat. As always, it's great to be on these phone calls and these webinars. You know, when you think about it, we travel for lots of reasons. Sometimes we travel for a holiday or vacation or a family reunion. But just recently I've had people call me, you know, should I take mother to a family wedding? Should mother go to a funeral service? And maybe they have to travel, you know, a day by airplane to take someone with dementia to an important family event. So there's lots of reasons we need to think about this. And, you know, Kat, I have to say that years ago I tended to be a bit more cautious. I would, you know, try to ask a lot more detail and, you know, kind of encourage the care partner to develop an elaborate game plan. But more and more, I think a contemporary view of dementia care today is that we want to, whenever possible, with our family member or friend that we're concerned about, I like to say it very simply, live life, live life. And so I now have evolved to the point where I say go for it. You know, if you want to take your grandmother to a family wedding, let's think about how that could look and can that happen. So a couple of just sort of general principles I have is I think, you know, certainly ask your friends and family for thoughts or advice. You know, use common sense. You don't want to, you know, hike up a mountain with grandmother in the middle of a hot summer. You want to make sure the space is accessible. If you are able to do a dry run and, you know, maybe there is a wedding, maybe ask your cousin to, you know, check out the area. Is there a family bathroom? Are there a lot of steps? You know, what is it like? So whenever you can, scope it out. Try to have a travel buddy with you, a family member, or maybe even a paid caregiver, somebody who can help you, because two people are definitely better than one when it comes to carrying. The other thing I like to say is if you do have some ability, if it's maybe just trying to take a little day trip or go to a favorite old haunt, you know, go off hours. I think in general it is true that big crowds aren't usually a very good idea for the care partner. What happens is there's a lot of, you know, noise and activity. It might be overstimulating. And of course, in a big crowd, you might turn your back for a minute and mom might get away from you. So you got to be careful with that. I talked to a family recently, not quite about summer travel, Kat, but it was like, you know, should I take my mother to church? I'm afraid she'll be disruptive. And I said, well, how about going to a service that isn't, the Sunday morning service, maybe something a bit off hours or one of the other kinds of masses or services, and that way, there'll be a smaller group. The only other thing I would suggest in terms of just general rules of thumb is certainly, again, this issue of mobility and falls. Falls are such an enemy for any of us who've cared for older family members. And then, again, if possible, working out the bathroom situation. Those family bathrooms are a blessing, but even when my own mother was still alive, I would sometimes have to go into the ladies' room or sometimes take her into the men's room because I couldn't really trust that she could go in there and find her way. So you might want to do what the Alzheimer's Association has done for many years, some of them, develop a very simple card and have 20 or 30 of them made or 50 and say something like, "Pardon my mother has Alzheimer's disease. Thank you so much for your understanding." So if you do have to scoot into a bathroom or if there is an issue, sometimes that can help people understand your journey. So many of us are touched by dementia. You hopefully will find a lot of friends along the journey and maybe even make some new ones.
Those are some great tips, and I think you touched on something there towards the end. We actually had a question come in about how do I deal with a bathroom situation when traveling and taking care of that, and I think oftentimes as caregivers we can be apologetic for a situation or ashamed or embarrassed. But kind of really having that attitude in mind of, I am a caregiver. I am caring for somebody I love, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I may need to ask for assistance, and I may need to do some things or ask for some things that aren't what maybe traditional travelers need. Like, I need to escort my father into the restroom, or do you have a family bathroom that's available?
Right. And I will say it gets kind of embarrassing at times. You just have to, really just have a smile on your face and, be bold and jump in. And you know what? You may get a dirty look or two, but hopefully most people will have a lot of empathy and understanding.
That's right. And a little bit of a sense of humor goes a long way in these situations as well.
Right, exactly. And that may also be, Kat, another very good point. Let's say you have never taken mom on a trip. Instead of maybe going across country the first time, take a little afternoon jaunt and go to a neighborhood, a neighborhood in town, to go to a nice bookstore and, go there and sit and have coffee. Maybe take a 30-minute trip with mom, and that might be nice practice for you because then you'll discover some things that might help or help you in the journey. I know with my own mother, Dorothy, I discovered that when I would take her out to lunch later on in her journey with dementia, it became really hard to get her out of the car and into the car and get her on the walker and really make things happen. So I actually learned to just take her to a fun drive-in where we could both sit in the car. There's Sonics and some of those places where they actually would deliver it out to your car and have our ice cream cone or our small cheeseburger, have some air conditioning on, have the music playing, and still have a nice outing and make it much simpler.
I love the idea of those practice runs, and I think sometimes we think, oh, if I'm going to travel, I've got to, if I'm going to make this important, and memorable, it's got to be this big to do. But yeah, just simple. I think you're right. Simple little trips, like lunch out that maybe you don't normally do. I love, I always catch those articles like the places in your state you need to see that you don't know about. Those can be maybe an easy half-day trip to really alert you to some of the obstacles you might face in that longer trip. Those are some good ideas.
Thank you.
I want to go to a question that relates to travel here that we received from Marcy. And Marcy emailed us at livechat@homeinstead.com. And here's her question, David. She says, my husband has dementia. He's 80 years old, but seems to feel good most of the time. His main problem is his short-term memory, and that is very bad. He's always wanting to go on a trip. It's usually for 2 or 3 days, every day he will say, when and where are we going on a trip? We went on a 2-day trip last April, but that didn't satisfy him. I'm also 80 and do the driving. I try to give him reasons not to go. He will say okay, but he's asking again soon. I was wondering if anyone else has this problem. I know it's not really a big problem, at least not as big as it's going to get. So what do you think, some advice we've got here for Marcy?
Sure. Well, at one level, good for him for having a lot of get up and go, even with dementia. He clearly has enjoyed probably being active and busy his whole life. And I tell you, Kat, I have met, believe it or not, people who have Alzheimer's or live by themselves, and they, much to their family's dismay, they're still pretty early, they'll get on a plane and take a vacation. They'll drive places. And you say, oh my gosh, I hope they're going to be okay. But I don't think it's really that unusual what Marcy's question is asking, which is that a lot of people, they want to keep up their old patterns. So what I'd suggest perhaps is, instead of thinking about the 2- and 3-day trips, see if you could plan some local jaunts, like again, maybe the ice cream shops, the drive-in, just even going for a nice drive in the country, maybe parking by the local lake or river, parking and seeing the children's Little League game, doing some things like that every day just to get out of the house, something where it's a bit simpler. It sounds like, you yourself may or may not have the energy to do a 2- and 3-day trip. So I'd see if you could just, distract him in some ways by some of these simple 1-day activities. If he genuinely keeps talking about these 2- and 3-day activities, again, turn this into something positive. Get out your old atlases and map books, use the internet, and he might enjoy planning the trip. Maybe you could look at maps and be thinking about things, doing research, and this might, again, help him feel like he's almost taking a kind of an imaginary trip. That idea of planning can be very, very positive. I guess my final thought, Kat, is if you do have family, maybe your son or daughter could even go on a short cruise with you or do something like that where there's a bit more structure. My dad and I actually took my mother to Alaska twice after her Alzheimer's diagnosis on a cruise. It was a 1-week cruise on the West Coast, and we found that structure with staff around and help with a routine, with me having a cabin a couple of doors down from them, it actually worked very well, and she loved the trip and loved having that to actually have something to look forward to. So I think this idea of giving the person something to look forward to and trying to keep active, very therapeutic, very positive for the person with dementia.
That is great. And David, I think my favorite tip in there, and I really hope this helps you, Marcy, is I think a lot of this is the desire to sit down and to plan, right? To sit down and think, pull out the atlas, pull out those travel magazines and say, okay, where do you want to go? Let's talk about what we can do. And maybe it's, again, not a huge trip, or maybe it is that, cruise. And David, you're right. Cruises, I think, are a wonderful idea. Having done many myself, the staff is incredibly accommodating, very helpful, and you're in a contained situation. So I think that is a wonderful idea. But I absolutely love the idea of when he gets that itch of wanting to take a trip, maybe satisfying it a little bit with, all right, well, let's sit down and look at some of these, travel brochures and talk about where you want to go, and instead of just, writing it off or being frustrated that it's coming up again.
Well said, Kat. And I think the other piece of this is, why not also do some reminiscence about past trips? I've seen these laminated maps of the world, or laminated maps, wall maps of the U.S. It might be fun to buy one of those and start putting red dots or little pins in places you've visited, going through old family photographs and scrapbooks, maybe organizing them, but have some fun reminiscing about some of the great trips you've had in the past. I think that would be a terrific activity.
That is awesome. Okay, let's take a question that isn't necessarily travel related, David, but I know, as caregivers, we get so busy and we have so many questions every day. So I love to give our listeners the opportunity to ask whatever their question is, regardless of the topic. So um, this question is from Maria, and here's her question. She says, my husband was diagnosed with vascular dementia, but he has pain all over his body and terrible headaches. Is the pain a connection to this vascular dementia? Now, I know we're not doctors, and we don't even play them on live chats, David. But from your information, is pain, from your expertise, is pain a symptom of vascular dementia, or what can we tell
Right.
you?
Well, thanks for clearing me from being charged with masquerading as a physician. But I think what I would say to you here, Maria, is that my gut tells me that the pain issue is a separate problem. I'm not aware of any direct links between vascular dementia and pain, and even just the idea of a person with dementia telling you their head hurts. I was with a person recently, and I think that was almost their way of saying that their head hurts, something's wrong with my head, and almost a way of saying that they know they're not thinking the way they used to think and having struggles. Pain is a very interesting topic in dementia care, and there's a lot of evidence that pain goes unreported. It's very hard for a person with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia to say, nurse, my tooth started hurting last night at midnight. I think I need to go to a dentist. Sometimes there are these issues that just go undetected, and because of that, it really does damage quality of life. I think my recommendation to you would be, Maria, to get him to a good physician to really study what's happening, make sure there's no dental issues going on, but it could be something like a chronic condition like arthritis that's causing him issues. I also wonder, Maria, if you've even tried, a friend of mine is a geriatrician, he might even try a round of, ibuprofen or the Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol. Sometimes those kinds of medications can help with some of that overall pain. But to be very specific, I'm not aware of any direct link that a vascular dementia causes pain. My gut tells me that your husband may have other issues going on. So I encourage you to, get to a doctor and see what you can come up with.
Absolutely. And I think it is very easy as a caregiver. I was a caregiver for my grandparents. I have a child who has a chronic condition, and it's very easy for us when something pops up to say, oh, it's related to the Alzheimer's or the dementia or the whatever it is. But anytime there is a new symptom or a symptom becomes more severe, that is reason to immediately call the doctor and get something scheduled. Don't automatically assume that it's connected to whatever.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. And the other thing that is maybe a little bit of a tangent to your question, Maria, but I think a very important thing that we always have to remind ourselves is, most of these dementias are fairly slow and progressive. So if your mom or dad or the person you're caring for, is kind of happy-go-lucky, has dementia, they have some issues, day in, day out, kind of a routine is established, and one day, boom, they're withdrawing, they're not coming out for lunch, they're pacing, they're slapping, they're lethargic. Again, it probably means they're sick or they're in pain, because these people have so much less resilience than the rest of us do. And when something like this happens, it tends to really sink them in many ways and cause behavioral issues. So sudden changes are not the progression of dementia. They're not a normal part of the disease. It usually means illness or pain, and that's what we want to attend to.
Great. Okay, if you have questions for David, please put them in on the question section of your screen, and we will get to those. David, we do have a question here from Paula, and she's looking for some tips about traveling with her husband who has Alzheimer's but is also very hard of hearing. So what do you think about this situation?
Well, you know, it is really sad. I talk to families all the time, and I meet people who are having profound vision issues, profound hearing issues, and there's just no doubt that it compounds the issues around dementia, that when someone can't hear or see, that everything gets much more muddled and tougher. So once again, I think the answer is you can't change his situation very much, but you can change your strategies. So someone like him I would not take to a movie, where he can't hear, and that would frustrate him. I wouldn't take him maybe even to a concert in a venue where, again, he might be so disappointed and not hear the words or the music. I think this is the person you want to take a nice drive if possible, turning on that nice car stereo loud. Most people, even with some hearing issues, can hear most of that. Taking time to be out of doors. It is summer if it's not too hot where you are. Enjoying being in nature, when you're outside. Well, Kat, let me ask you, when you go out on a nice summer evening, I think in your hometown of Omaha, what do you see, what do you smell, what do you hear in your backyard?
Oh, well, this year it would be cicadas.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, I love going out other than my allergies, which you can probably hear right now, and right after my husband has mowed. So that fresh cut grass or after a thunderstorm, hearing the cicadas, we have beautiful sunsets here too.
Terrific. So in other words, I think you don't have to travel 2 hours to enjoy that wonderful experience. I think it's spiritual, it's sensory. So I think being out of doors is terrific. You don't necessarily have to hear things. So I think I would just modify your travel plans, take nice drives, be out of doors, go to a museum where you notice people aren't talking very much but enjoying the paintings. All of that I think would be very pleasurable for your husband.
I love that. I used to, David, one tip I would give is if there is something you want to do, whether it's a performance or something, before you commit to doing that, contact the venue and ask if they have any assistive devices. I used to take my grandmother to plays every month. We have a wonderful local playhouse here. And she was very hard of hearing, even with her hearing aids. But they had these assistive devices that she could get for free, and so she didn't have to worry about not understanding. And I still think she probably didn't hear everything as well as she would like to, but that visual experience on the stage she enjoyed. So try a few things out, but be willing to modify and try some things that you haven't thought of before. I love the being outside aspect.
Yeah, very good.
Great idea.
I have to laugh. My father passed away in 2012, and he did not have dementia. He was as sharp as all got out, but he did have poor hearing, and he refused to wear hearing aids no matter how hard I tried to get him to, put them on and use them. And so I would take him to movies because he liked going to movies, and they always say, "Oh, that soundtrack was terrible. They just don't make movies the way they should anymore." I say, Dad, I think there might be another reason, but we'll just let it be, But he was always complaining that the actors were talking too fast and the soundtrack was bad. So yeah, you got to also keep your sense of humor a bit.
That's right. David, we've got another question that came in. This one is from Joy, and Joy is looking for some tips when traveling by airplane. So, man, even traveling alone without another person who has dementia, traveling by airplane can sometimes be an incredibly frustrating experience. So how do we manage this and keep our sanity when we have a loved one who's living with dementia and we're flying with them?
Wow, what a tough question. I have to laugh because I flew home from Chicago last night, and I was supposed to be home at 10, and I got home at 1:30 in the morning. So I think flying can be very stressful for all of us. Well, here's a case, once again, where I think you can do some good planning. I think if you can get on a nonstop flight versus one that has lots of stops, I know that isn't always easy, but I think that would certainly be something I'd recommend if at all possible. So, for example, maybe I live in Sacramento, and we have some nonstops here, but going down to San Francisco, for example, there probably are many more direct flights. So if it were my family member, I might even consider taking a drive to a more distant airport if I could have that nonstop connection. The other thing I would say is, again, maybe have these little cards printed up. Pardon me, my mother has Alzheimer's. Thank you in advance for your understanding. I think all of that can be very, very helpful. You might want to pay the little extra fee to get the seats with more leg room to give yourself a bit more comfort. But I would just be very transparent when you're checking in and talk to the airline. So many families, 1 in 3 American families, have been touched by dementia. I have to say that I find that most people, not everybody, occasionally you are disappointed, but most people I think are very empathetic. And my greatest hope is that when you're at the airport, they will give you lots of support and understanding, and really do their best to help you and your family member feel secure, feel safe, secure, and valued.
Absolutely. And I really, really love those tips. And you might even consider, I know there are a lot of websites out there where they'll search for the lowest ticket price for you, but you might consider trying to book through the airline, talking to a human, and explain, hey, I'm going to be traveling with a loved one who has dementia. Here are some of my concerns. You're not the first person to do this. And they have many different things that can help you, whether it's, making sure that you have an escort from the gate to baggage, or if you do have a connecting flight from gate to gate. They may be able to help you with some identification measures for your loved one, just in case a wandering situation happens. So there's lots of things. We just have to be open about our situation, ask for help, and I love the idea, David, of stepping onto that plane and handing that first attendant who's there to greet you that card that says, my mother has Alzheimer's, a little explanation. Flight attendants really do go out of their way to help guests who have those needs. So
I was on a plane a few months ago, Kat, and there was a young couple with a newborn, and they had little notes for the people all around with some chocolate, and they said, thank you in advance. We really hope our little daughter won't make too much of a ruckus. Again, we apologize if she cries, but here's a little chocolate to soothe your journey. I thought that was just a brilliant idea.
That is awesome. That is great.
But let me also jump in, Kat. You mentioned something that I don't think we've maybe given enough attention to, but certainly one of the risks of travel and of airports and of going to walk to a farmer's market or things like this is this idea of what we often call in the field elopement, which I don't really like that word, but the idea of exit seeking or someone just getting away from you. So I would say that even the best caregivers, you get distracted for a minute. Someone, you run into an old friend or some incident happens, and it just takes a minute for you just to lose your focus. And mother could be halfway down the airport corridor, or have walked down a city street, and you may lose her. So I will say that it's good to have, if you are traveling, I would definitely have some photos of your parent, maybe some little copies of them on the copier, or scan them. You may consider, if your mom or dad or family member is someone who tends to be pretty active, enrolling them in the National Alzheimer's Association Medic Alert Safe Return Program. The Safe Return Program, I don't have the link for it off the top of my head, but if you Google that, Alzheimer's Association, for a fairly modest fee, Kat, you can get a kit they send you with a bracelet, things to iron into clothes, and you email the photograph in. So if mother does get away from you, with one phone call, they can send that information electronically to all the first responders in that area. And then if somebody finds mother and they can see the bracelet, they have a number to call too. So that might be a little insurance for somebody who wants to take mom and dad out on the road.
That's great. And if nothing else, we're all walking around with smartphones. before you head out the door, just take a picture of Mom right there, what she's wearing, the whole shebang.
Yeah, Kat, what a great idea, because when something happens, you get so stressed out, and if the police say now, what was Mother wearing? I have to confess, I'm not sure I'd remember. I'd be so stressed out. I probably wouldn't even remember what Mother was wearing, a red dress or purple dress. So I think that idea of taking a picture when you go on your outing is a great idea.
Okay, let's take a quick little break, David. We've got a poll question I would like to ask all of our listeners. So today's question is, what is your role in the senior care community? Are you an unpaid family caregiver? Are you a professional caregiver, non-medical? Are you a professional caregiver, medical? Do you manage or coordinate care for seniors? Or do none of those describe you? And David, the reason we ask these, as you know, at Home Instead, we like to create different programs and resources. So we want to make sure that we are creating the resources for those of you who are listening, and we're getting you the materials and all the information that's relevant to you. So David, while they're taking that poll, speaking of resources, you have a great resource for family caregivers who are living in this dementia journey. Can you tell everyone a little bit about the book that you co-authored?
Oh, well, thank you, Kat, so much. Yes, I'm very delighted to share with you that I've written a number of books with one of my best friends and colleagues, Virginia Bell, who's in Lexington, Kentucky. And by the way, today is Virginia's 93rd birthday, Kat. And
happy birthday, Virginia.
Virginia still runs 10Ks, does Pilates with her husband Wayne 4 times a week, and travels all over. We're going to be at the Pioneer Network meeting together in August in Chicago. So anyway, happy birthday, Virginia. But we've written a number of books on what we call the Best Friends Approach to Alzheimer's Care, and several of them are for families and professionals on activities and staff training. But the book that might be most of interest to people on this call, since we have so many family members on the call, is a book we wrote called A Dignified Life, The Best Friends Approach to Alzheimer's Care. And that book is a very up-to-date book with lots of good ideas on how to travel this caregiving journey, how to communicate well, how to use a life story, how to manage behavior. We talk a lot about resources and kind of, really getting the whole family on board. And that book, A Dignified Life, is widely available in Amazon.com or other stores. And Kat, I'm also proud to say that we will have a new book coming out later this year on a major new reworking of our original Best Friends book to Alzheimer's Care that will talk mostly for professionals, can share a lot of ideas, including a couple of best practices from Home Instead. I've been so impressed with Home Instead and all the great work you all are doing. So I've actually put a couple of your cool ideas in the book as well.
That is very exciting, David. I love that there was a time when care was just so very institutional, and we get to this day, I think we have images in our head of that, white walls and hard floors, and that's what care looks like. And I love the idea of the Best Friends approach and really making care, whether it's you're a professional caregiver or you're a family caregiver, really be more person-centered about that individual person and having that connection and the care based on that, not based on, what the latest research has said.
Ultimately, I think the very contemporary view of dementia care, and I know that what's been so exciting for me working with Home Instead is that they understand that, sadly, Kat, we still seem to be way off or, way down the road from having a more effective medication for dementia. So actually, I think the treatment for dementia in so many ways is socialization, is engagement, doing things together. And that's why in our books we talk a lot about how to, make the most out of activities, and why I know in the Home Instead training they really stress that when you come to someone's home to help, that you in many ways are a best friend. You put on the music and do some dancing. You spend time in the backyard. You watch an interesting show on television. You kind of do a scavenger hunt through the house and maybe talk about the old baseball trophies or look at scrapbooks together. And this really creates what I call this therapeutic environment, this environment that's healing, and helps the person, find more feelings of comfort and safety and security. And it's amazing, as tough as dementia is, and I know many of the questions we've had in these seminars have been really hard questions. I think there are a lot of ways to lift this disease up and help someone, smile and laugh and enjoy some of the nice moments of the day.
You're right, and all of that, David, really points back to maintaining the dignity. So there's so many ways that can be, so many things that happen in the care process that can make somebody feel vulnerable, or that they've lost so much of their independence, so much of their dignity. And I think when we're really connecting at that human level as a caregiver, that's where we're really embracing their dignity as a person, no matter where they're at in that journey.
Well said, Kat. I think it's time for you to write your own book.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, before we get down that road, let's take some more questions. We have a question here from Charlotte. And if you're just joining us, I want to let you know you've joined our live chat for the month of June. And joining me is David Troxel. And we are halfway through this chat, but we've got a lot more to cover. So let's go to Charlotte's question. Charlotte says, we went to Florida in March. My husband has Alzheimer's, and the first week he was miserable and wanted to go home. He finally settled somewhat. We plan on returning this coming March. He says he wants to go, but others tell me we shouldn't take him, so I feel conflicted. We will be gone a month. He enjoys and lives in the moment. I guess I just want to know if this is advisable.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Yeah, I guess clearly I can't say yes, it will work, or no, it won't work. Everybody's so different. What you described in the past, I think, is actually pretty thoughtful and I think pretty typical, which is that change can be hard for people like your husband. You mentioned the first week was a bit tougher, and then he settled in and enjoyed himself. So again, under my philosophy, Kat, of kind of living life, I think I would try again. Expect that he might have some adjustment issues. Do your best to, get through those with, maybe script yourself about, honey, how wonderful we're on vacation. He'll read your emotion. If you're excited and enthused about the trip, that might help. You might talk with him ahead of time about the Florida trip and everything that will be happening. And, there may indeed come a time where you might want to have him stay in a nice assisted living community for respite, hire someone 24/7 to help him, and go off and do your own vacation. And I'm actually okay with that. I think caregivers need to recharge their own batteries. But my hope is that you can get a couple more nice visits to Florida and enjoy that time together. So I would say go for it until it's really clear that the challenges and negatives outweigh the positives. I don't know, Kat, what do you think?
I think you're right. I would look at your initial trip as that dry run that we've talked about before. What were some things in that first week that maybe you could identify, okay, I'm going to try to plan for this because we know we can't plan for everything. And we know what worked once may not work again. But try and identify maybe some of those triggers that hit him last time in that first month. Maybe bringing some of those knickknacks from home or things that he really identifies with in your home with you on vacation so he sees them in that setting. So it feels a little more familiar for him. But I think you're right, David. I don't like giving advice of, well, just pack it in, you're all done. Try it, but have that backup plan. Also, in Florida, wherever you're headed, look and see, maybe call the local home instead senior care there and see, hey, I'd really like to talk to you about maybe getting a caregiver for a few hours every week while I'm here. So like David said, you can get that much needed respite that you need and you really deserve. And it really might help your husband as well. You might enjoy having, you know, a little break and a little time on his own.
Yeah, very good idea. And you know, Kat, I think as always you have some great wisdom. I mean, you know, maybe, I don't know if you're driving down, but maybe pack your familiar comforter. If you have a orange and red comforter on your bed, bring that along. You know, bring the pillowcases that he usually sleeps on. Throw in a painting you know, from your house,
Yeah.
or some family pictures to give him that sense of continuity, and that might very well help.
Absolutely. Okay, David, I want to go to a question that was emailed into us. And this isn't really travel related, but it is a great question. And this one comes from Caroline. Caroline says, myself, my sister-in-law, and my mother, who has mild dementia, are flying to the Bahamas. Oh, hey, it is about traveling. To stay at an all-inclusive for 5 days. The plan is to always have someone with Mom, but she loves to talk to people and frequently walks away from us to talk to strangers. What is the best way to encourage Mom to stay with us without making her feel like she's incapable?
You know, I'm so interested in this question because I was actually in Rochester, New York on Monday of this week, yesterday, and was speaking at an Alzheimer's Association conference, and a woman asked me the exact same question, almost word for word, but she wasn't in the Bahamas. You know, I have met people, I have friends who are in their 30s and 40s who talk to everybody they meet, who talk to everybody they go to at Starbucks. And you know, at one level, part of me loves the idea of your mother being social and querying people and giving them compliments and chit-chatting. And, you know, I guess it could be a little awkward at times, a little bit embarrassing, but I would just let your mom be your mom at one level. You know, I think that most people will hopefully sense that maybe she isn't completely intact but has great intentions. And I would let your mom be your mom, honestly, and just have some fun with it, and, you know, let her be her. Now, the part about, you know, maybe walking off, again, I think we've covered a lot in this conference call already. You know, I think you might want to print up some little cards to take on vacation with you in case someone does appear to be rattled or bothered. I think gently redirecting your mother, not saying, Mother, don't do that, or Mother, stop that, or Mother, you're embarrassing us. I think you don't want to be so literal. I think if you can, hey, Mother, I hear that they're starting happy hour. You know, we want to not be late to get a good table. You know, hey, Mother, you know, the dolphin show is beginning. I really want to get a good seat. Come with me. So I think if you can, redirect her gently, you know, take her hand and lead her away. Try to be playful and positive. Don't say, Mother, you're embarrassing me, things like that, because, again, she doesn't have that insight to maybe know that she's perhaps, you know, violating a few boundaries. But hopefully everyone will be in a great mood. And if worse comes to worse, you said it's all-inclusive, I think you should definitely have a few margaritas by the end of the evening. I think you deserve them.
I agree. And it's vacation. Everybody's there. There are two groups of people there. People who are there to serve you and make sure you have a great time, and people who are there in a great mood because they're on vacation. And your mom walking up and talking to them and asking questions or may seem a little strange at first, but I think you're right, David. I think most people are going to go with it and be just fine with it. So relax, have a great time, and like David said, let Mom be Mom for a little bit. And if you need help while you're in the Bahamas, shoot me an email. I'm happy to tag along. Okay.
Kat, I thought you and I were going to be the cruise directors on a cruise. Now you're abandoning me for the Bahamas. What happened?
Maybe the cruise can go to the Bahamas, David.
There you go. Okay, I think we need to launch the first ever cruise. Actually, in all seriousness, you know, there actually have been cruises for care partners and their families. I've read about them over the years, where, you know, they have a whole setup where someone will be kind of doing respite, and many of them have been very successful. A friend of mine in Vancouver, Canada has organized some, and I've read about others. So that may be a new project for us at Home Instead in 2016.
You know, David, we've actually done several of them over the years, and it was a really great experience. And I'm telling you, I was fortunate enough to go on the cruises with the caregivers, and they would show up on the cruise, I mean, looking like they had 500 pounds on their shoulders. And this is a true story. It was the last day of a cruise one year, and I'm waiting for a cab to go from the port to the airport. And this couple, a woman and what looked like her mother, said, "Oh, can we share the cab with you?" And I thought, sure. David, we were 5 minutes into the ride until I realized they were in my group. I didn't recognize them. They looked so refreshed and so different after 5 days of vacation. So vacations can do wonders.
That's terrific. And, you know, I used to go on some cruises with my mom and dad, and I will say many cruises have a lot of older people, and you definitely sense that there are people who are traveling with family, and mother or grandmother has Alzheimer's, and
Yes.
I think there is a real sense of safety and security and the ability for family members to still have some fun and break away, and, you know, there's definitely some positives there.
Yeah. David, let's take this question that comes to us from Sam. Here's what Sam says. We have a vascular dementia family member who is often very hard to please, unhappy about food, climate, TV, appearance of others, etc., whether at home, in adult daycare, or when we go out. We try to be encouraging and change what we can to help please her, but she continues to find fault with many things. Is this normal for dementia? And any suggestions on how to help manage?
I guess my first question, Kat, not to be facetious, but I wonder if maybe this person was always a bit critical and challenging and difficult, because I have met people who, you know, who are that way in life, and, you know, maybe they're always sending food back at the restaurants, and now that they have Alzheimer's disease, that still continues. My guess is that, you know, your family member with Lewy body dementia may also have some frontal temporal dementia, which causes personality change and often will cause a bit of this, you know, sort of narcissism or outlandish behavior, and you kind of lose those disinhibitions. I think it's a tough one because, again, you can't ask the family member to stop doing it. You can't explain. You can't plead. You can't criticize. Most of that won't work. So I guess what I'd recommend is, you know, people with Alzheimer's, they do very much follow your emotional lead. And if you are going out to a restaurant, for example, and say, "Oh my goodness, this pumpkin cheesecake is fantastic. Mother, don't you agree? This is a wonderful pumpkin cheesecake." Sometimes they will capture your spirit, and that might redirect them a bit of the way from their negativity. Otherwise, I fear that it may just be a pattern that is either, again, reflective of a long lifetime pattern, or just maybe her own expression of, you know, she doesn't quite understand why the world isn't working the way she expects it to. If she has confusion, doesn't always know exactly where she is, what time it is. Some of her criticism and her critical attitude may be because she's not understanding what's happening. Maybe the meal is coming out in 5 or 10 minutes, but she thinks it's more like an hour because she can't track the time. So I think, Kat, there's obviously a lot of explanations for it. I think the behavior doesn't sound that unusual. I could see how someone could get to that point. I would say try to redirect, try to give a positive spirit, and I think that might help. Also, Kat, and this is one of those tough things with Alzheimer's, sometimes as the person gets a bit worse, the behavior actually gets a bit better. And it's possible that as this person with early dementia travels his or her own journey, some of this criticism and negativity might actually go away, and they may end up being a sweet pussycat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and Sam, I'm going to say that I know how you feel. It's I will preface this by saying I loved my grandmother very, very much. She was my best friend, but she could complain about anything. Um, and, you know, it's one thing, right, when you talk about, oh, it's the climate. Okay, we can get you a blanket. You don't like the TV, we can change the channel. Um, but when it starts being like, wow, you've put on some weight, haven't you? Or I think I talked about in another chat about how she hated the fact that I wear my hair cut short. And some of those personal things that really hurt coming from somebody who you love and you admire and you're trying to help. So the best advice that I have is keep a sense of humor. Um, you know, we talk about words, you know, I've said before, the nursery rhyme, sticks and stones um, may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words do hurt, but remember that that is not her. That's not maybe her real thoughts and her real opinions. Um, you know, that part of that is the disease. And keep a sense of humor about it where you can. Don't put too much stock into the complaining. And David, I love your suggestion, and it is so true that we feed off of each other's energy. So if you are lighthearted and appreciative of things and complimentary of things, hopefully she can pick up on that and follow suit. So best of luck, Sam. That's tough. Okay, we are drawing to an end here at the chat. So before we say goodbye to everybody, I do want to let everybody know about some resources. We've talked about a lot of different resources in the chat, and so I want to give you some information on what to expect. So, and you'll have to forgive me because yeah, it looks like my computer is not cooperating. But I will still, I think I've done this a few times, I might be able to wing it. So if you have not already liked us or joined us on Facebook and you are on Facebook, I hope you will come and like us and interact with our community there. We are at facebook.com/rememberforalzheimers. And David, that has really grown into a great community of support and information and resources. So, and that's always one of the first places that we announce our new chats or our upcoming chats. Also, if you need information on dementia, on any part of dementia, if you have a question for David after this chat, if you need information on respite, we have a respite care grant program with Hilarity for Charity. You can get all of this information at our website, which is helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. So we hope you will visit us there. And that is where you can also register for the next chat. And David, where can folks go if they want to pick up one of your books or if they want to be one of the first to hear about your new upcoming book?
Well, thank you very much, Kat. Also, the Best Friends Approach is also on Facebook, and we're almost at 1,500, Kat. So we're like, maybe someone on this call will put us over. I think we're like at 1,488 or something. And you can go to facebook.com and then /Best Friends Approach. We do have a website, bestfriendsapproach.com. My books are always available through my press, Health Professions Press in Baltimore, or widely available on Amazon.com, where I think everybody buys their books now. We even have Dignified Life on Kindle and those e-readers, which more and more people are telling me they're finding the books. I always recommend, Kat, the Alzheimer's Association at alz.org. They've been very supportive of families, of course, for many, many decades now. And delighted that you at Home Instead are working with Hilarity for Charity, and it's terrific that there actually are grants available for families to get some in-home help.
Yeah, it has been a really great endeavor for us over coming up on a year now. So we've been able to help a lot of families get that. You guys really deserve a break. You guys work so hard. So I really encourage you to go and apply for that Relief Care grant. And that website where you can apply for that is helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. So head on over there. All right, before we wrap up, David, I want to give everybody a sneak peek into our live chat next month, and it's with one of your friends, Molly Carpenter. We are going to be talking about asking for help, getting help, and accepting help. Sometimes all three of those can be incredibly difficult. So we're going to have some great tips on how to do all three. And we're going to look to you guys, to the audience, to also share some of their tips and what's worked for you. So I hope you will join us. I'll be with Molly Carpenter July 30th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So go register. Registration is open now. David, I want to thank you so much for, I know you're a busy, busy guy. Thanks for taking time and chatting with us and answering some questions.
Yeah, always my pleasure. I'm going to try to be on that call next month with Molly. She's one of my favorite people in the field. Molly's written a wonderful book on Alzheimer's and caregiving, and a friend of mine in England says that really the secret for excellent dementia care is having informed love, and I think Molly really reflects that in everything she does.
She does. And listeners, if you, David mentioned Molly's book. It's called Confidence to Care. So if you want to check that out, simply go to confidencetocare.com. David, thanks again. We will see you soon. And thanks to all of you who have joined us. We will see you this time next month. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.